under Donald Trump, America could be captured and influenced by the Russians. And then what went on, as you said, was a disclosure of classified information to a country that was considered an enemy, but not by Donald Trump. So that was like a little precursor of what has gone on. And then also his attitude toward classified intelligence, later taking all those boxes of classified documents to his private residence and treating them like they were in a coat rack. All of this was foreshadowed by that meeting. It's just that he didn't have enough power in his first term in office to do the things he wanted to do.
Welcome back to Just the Facts, a show with me, Jill Wine-Banks, the Watergate Girl, where I focus on facts because I believe facts still matter. And it's important that you know the facts. And today we have a great guest to talk about facts, Ruth Ben-Ghiat. I am looking forward to my conversation with her, and I will be having it very shortly to talk about all of the things she has studied. She is a scholar of fascism, and she has written a book called Strongmen from Mussolini to Present, which of course these days includes Donald Trump. She will talk to us about what happened in the Oval Office last Friday, the embarrassing spectacle of an American president and vice president deliberately attacking a president of an ally, President Zelensky, who is fighting a war to protect America from being invaded, to protect Poland, to protect all of Europe. And we must talk about that. You've seen her, I'm sure, on MSNBC. You hopefully have read her Substack, which is called Lucid, because it gives really good insight. And I think if you haven't read it, you should sign up to read it. She teaches at NYU. She teaches, in addition to teaching about history, she also teaches Italian studies. I don't know if I'll get time to talk to her about that because I have so many questions that are concerning me and that are concerning, I'm sure, all of you about what is happening in America. Are we already part of the axis of evil? I'm welcoming Ruth today to talk about all of this. Welcome, Ruth. I am so honored to have you on the show today. It couldn't be a better time.
Yes, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. Actually, when I said it couldn't be a better time, maybe it couldn't be a worse time for America, but a better time to have you. And my friends and I are wringing our hands. I know my listeners are too. And so I'm really glad because I have a lot of questions for you. So let's start with your book, which of course is called Strongmen from Mussolini to Present. I didn't expect that to be Mussolini to Trump. Am I overreacting, or would you say Trump is heading in that direction, or is he already there?
Well, he's in the book, which I wrote. It came out originally in 2020. And so one of the last things I said about him in the original edition is that I thought that he wouldn't leave office quietly. Because
Boy, were you right.
And then the paperback has an updated epilogue to deal with January 6th. But it was very clear to me from his behavior in his first term that he liked authoritarians. He saw himself as a kindred spirit. He had aspirations to have some form of authoritarian power and expand his executive, reach. Tame the courts, and all of these were aspirations, as was his leanings toward Russia. In May 2017, so just a few months after he was inaugurated, he had the Russian ambassador to the U.S. and the Russian foreign minister in the Oval Office with just a Russian state photographer present. And that was very important. And I've thought about that for years. And now it has new relevance after what's happened recently with the Oval Office and Zelensky.
Yes. And let me just ask you, because when they were there, if I'm not mistaken, Donald Trump shared some confidential
Yes.
information that was from Israeli intelligence.
Yes.
Is that hurting America getting information from our allies or from what used to be our allies?
Absolutely. And so that was a little preview that it was giving a propaganda opportunity for the Russians. That's why only a TASS
Yeah.
photographer was there to say that under Donald Trump, America could be captured and influenced by the Russians. And then what went on, as you said, was a disclosure of classified information to a country that was considered an enemy, but not by Donald Trump. So that was like a little precursor of what has gone on. And then also his attitude toward classified intelligence, later
Right.
taking all those boxes of classified documents to his private residence and treating them like they were in a coat rack. All of this was foreshadowed by that meeting. It's just that he didn't have enough power in his first term in office to do the things he wanted to do.
And unfortunately, of course, you mentioned, of course, what happened last Friday. And that was this meeting with Zelensky, in which, and we'll talk more about what happened. But I want to note that TASS was there and AP wasn't.
Yeah.
And again, we're seeing the same thing that you mentioned very early on. And that was a real warning to us. And I mean, I'm not sure why he has taken up with Russia. I don't know. Do you have some ideas? I mean, is it just that he loves power and he loves seeing the power that Putin has gained? Or is it that they have something on him? What's going on? Or is it money that they're promising him or that they have already given him? What's the cause of Russia, 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 as he would say?
I think we'll never likely know exactly what the nature of uh, the bond of Trump and Russia is. I think what we do know is that for many years, and I wrote an op-ed for the New York Times that came out on January 30th. It was about Tulsi Gabbard, but it's also about him. He has internalized a view of geopolitics for years, President Trump, that sees democracies as the problem. And so for example, ever since Putin invaded Ukraine, Trump has been blaming the United States or sometimes NATO for making a problem. And at one quote, he actually said that Putin had to go in, meaning he had to invade Ukraine, because the United States and Joe Biden were making problems for him by supporting Ukraine's bid for NATO membership. And so there's a whole history of Trump blaming democracies, and especially American democracy, treating American democracy as kind of a hostile problem actor in the world. So
And of
that's,
course,
yeah,
yeah, he's also, of course, saying that Zelensky is the dictator and that Zelensky
yes.
invaded Russia, that it wasn't that Russia invaded Ukraine, but he's the aggressor. This is all insanity, of course. But unfortunately, with all the disinformation and social media, his followers are believing it. And I'm just wondering, because you talk often about the authoritarian playbook, has that playbook been changed by the existence of social media?
We can say that. So propaganda has always been a major, part of the playbook. And and it's useful to think about it this way. Propaganda is not just getting people to believe this or that lie.
No.
It's really about getting them to change the way they see the world. And if you're a foreign malign, country or trying to have malign influence, you really want people to start seeing the world in ways that benefit, say, the Kremlin. You don't want people to be standing up for their own national interests. You want them to be,
Mm,
whether they're aware of it or not, voting people in, for example, or doing things that actually serve the enemy, and that would be the Kremlin. So social media allows propaganda to circulate in a much more efficient and faster manner. So
uh,
there's a double-edged sword to it, because dissidents can use social media to kind of publicize their
uh,
causes, and and create communities that are transnational. But it's allowed with a combination of kind of trying to monopolize the message and also shutting down alternate voices on social media.
Mm.
It's been much easier for autocrats to kind of tell the story that they want told, like Zelensky being a dictator or Ukrainians being Nazis. That's part of
Yeah.
the same narrative.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And what about in terms of recent events? Hegseth just announced that he was cutting off all counterintelligence efforts or counter cyber against Russia. Is that part of the playbook? Is that part of the
Yeah.
danger we have? Uh, you've already said you wrote an op-ed about Tulsi Gabbard and what she means for the end of democracy. But now we have Hegseth taking these kinds of actions. Is this all part of a plan?
Yeah. So the part of the authoritarian playbook that's like maybe easier to understand is when it's called like autocratic capture, when they're taking over the judiciary, when they're they're starting to fiddle with elections or claiming that elections that actually were done legally were scams. But there's a whole other way. If you have a foreign partner, for example, you want you want their influence to be able to circulate among your people. And so, one way that the United States will be collaborating with Russia is to kind of let the walls of national security and intelligence and kind of checks on the circulation of Russian influence, let the walls come down,
Mm.
which is very scary. And so when Hegseth says, oh, US Cyber Command is no longer going to
Right.
investigate Russian threats, that's one part of the fence coming down. Then there's already been a whole other bunch of things like that. The FBI is had to
Yeah.
disband its task force against malign foreign influence. They're relaxing the Foreign Agent Registration Act enforcement. And they
And,
even dismantled something called Klepto Capture
right.
Task
Right.
Force, which was focused on Russian oligarchs.
Right.
So the idea is to allow just get rid of any checks on bad actors doing things in your country,
Right.
which is it's really like a treasonous thing to let all the protections that we have for national security, and that's why Gabbard is there in intelligence because she has internalized and seems to be a sympathizer of autocrats
Yeah.
who wish the American nation ill. They would
Right.
like to take us down, and these policies are making it easier to do that.
And let me add to your concerns, which is Pam Bondi, as the Attorney General, has eliminated Foreign Corrupt Practices Act
Yeah,
and said, we're not going to do that anymore. There's just all of these dissolution of laws that are meant to protect us, that have been passed by Congress, that are going to be ignored
yeah,
by this administration. And that's really, um, to me, it seems extremely dangerous, especially when you link all of these things together. And although I have a lot of questions and I want to go back to last Friday's meeting, but I sort of want to skip to the thing that is causing everyone I know to really be having high blood pressure, and that is, what can we do? What that, I mean, I go back and I really see a link to what happened in Germany when in 53 days it was the end of democracy. And I'm just wondering what the German people who had a very vibrant democracy, what didn't they do that we should learn from? What can we be doing? What can, and I'm going to go through this one at a time. Let's start with what can Congress do? And I recognize right now that Congress is principally controlled, not principally, is controlled by the Republicans, and they are unlikely to do anything. Is there anything that the minority can do other than complain? What can Congress do? And then we can move to what can the courts do? What can the people do? Those are the only hopes we have. Is there any hope in Congress?
yeah. I'm not an expert on the things that Congress can do, but I mean, obstructionism, filibustering. I mean, Um, but what I do have seen, and which is a shame, is that there's not enough people taking a very assertive vocal stand on this, like Jasmine
Okay.
Crockett and Chris Murphy and Sheldon Whitehouse. And it's interesting because like Whitehouse and Murphy have long been interested in the operation of corruption, and
Yes.
they see exactly what they're calling it out
Yeah.
because they were on the anti-kleptocrat, anti-corruption task forces and stuff. So I don't know why the rest of much of Democratic Congress people are not calling this out more. So
Yeah.
that's very disappointing. If Because it's not just for what can we do, how can we stop this through Congress, because I think probably we can't, but um, the American people feel very undefended right now, and these are their elected leaders. And if they're not hearing at this hour of emergency, if those people are not coming forth and speaking to their constituents and speaking to the nation, um, we need to have, I thought as soon as Musk started his coup, his digital coup, we needed to have as many people as possible get in front of the cameras and get prime time and do live streams and put them on YouTube and stuff, and have a united front to stop this, because that's the other issue. The other difficult thing right now is that we have Trump and Vance doing, I would say, a kind of classic authoritarian playbook, but we have something innovative. We are innovating the authoritarian playbook because we have Musk, and it's very difficult to know how to stop him.
Well, let's talk about that. But before I let you talk about that, one opportunity that might exist for this public display, there's been talk about whether everybody on the Democratic side, and maybe some Republicans who actually believe in democracy, should not attend the joint address to Congress tomorrow on
Yes,
Tuesday.
I think that's a good
But
idea.
there's another idea, which is that they should all attend and wave Ukrainian flags at all opportunities. And I'm sort of torn between don't, and I think Chris Murphy has said he's not coming, Senator Murphy. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but what do you think? What would be more powerful, not attending or waving Ukrainian flags? Booing, I don't know.
Um, Not attending, actually, in our age of social media, I said immediately that I liked that idea
Yeah,
because it's principled. But if you're not going to resign from Congress altogether, then just not showing up for this one episode
yeah,
actually pleases the aggressor, because this happened in Italy when Mussolini, he wasn't yet a dictator, but he was becoming one, and the opposition decided to boycott, and they decided to meet in a different place. They just like left. And guess what? The fascists were so happy because they didn't want them there anyway.
yeah,
And then they couldn't get back in, and these fascists, like the people like today's militias and Proud Boys, they were beating them up when they were trying to
yeah.
come back in. So it actually backfired. So in a social media age where you want affecting images, it's better to show up and like John Lewis said, create some good trouble,
Right.
either by booing. The Ukrainian flag is directly related to this disgrace that's so
Yes.
recent, but we have more things going on even than that. So showing up and making some good trouble, I think, is preferable.
Yeah. It's the same thing with the uh, employees of the federal government that have been contacting me about should I quit in protest? And I get it, why you would want to and why it would be horrible to have to go to the office every day knowing what you're being subjected to, knowing that you're going to get this email saying, tell me 5 things you accomplished this week, other than saying, I obeyed the Constitution, which should be the top of everybody's list. Um, and I went through this during Watergate when we debated, had we been fired? And if we hadn't, should we resign in protest? And Archie Cox, the special prosecutor, said, absolutely not. That's what
Yeah.
Donald Trump, what Richard
Yeah.
Nixon wants. He wants to
Yes.
get rid of you. You know this case. You know the evidence. You have power. And as long as you can do your job in a fair and ethical way, you must stay. And unfortunately, as painful as it must be to go to the office every day, I'm urging anyone who can possibly stay. Now, if you're asked to do something illegal, if you're asked to freeze funds, if you're asked to do something in court, of course you can't do that. You have to resign. But then you're resigning for a specific reason, and you can use the
Hmm.
media, social media, and uh, MSNBC and any other shows to make the point of what you've been asked to do and why it hurts the American
Hmm.
people. So
That's right.
that's sort of where we're at. Okay, so Congress maybe can do a little more, and I hope that they get those flags and get booze. I don't know, just do something. But all right, so what can the courts do? They've been so far stopping a lot of what Trump is trying through his executive orders and stopping what Musk and alleged Doge, the non thing that is called Doge. Um, is there anything? The thing is, they can't do anything except if someone brings a lawsuit and has
Hmm.
standing to do it. So I don't know what else they can do. Is there anything that has happened in other places? You said some stuff happened before Mussolini turned into a dictator, when he was on his way. What was the turning point? What made him a dictator? And what could either the legislature, the people, or the courts have done to prevent him from making that switch into uh, being a real dictator?
Well, he had a kind of emergency where he was going to be he was going to end up having to resign and lose everything because he had ordered the murder of the kind of major opposition politician.
Mm-hmm.
And the killers he hired didn't they botched it, and there were all these clues. And so he to avoid so investigation was launched, and to get rid of all of it, he declared dictatorship.
Oh,
So that's, when their backs are to the wall, whether it's they have a judicial reform, whatever it is, they tend to escalate when they think they're gonna have to leave power or go to jail.
wow.
And so, yeah, but the courts, they've been doing extremely heroic
Yep.
work with litigation. The problem is that from, again, a non-legal point of view, a system point of view,
Yeah.
perhaps, Donald Trump came in with a degree of power granted to him uh, by the Supreme Court, by the immunity decision. He came in with more power than many autocrats had. It took them years to get the power that he has.
Yeah. Boy,
That's the problem.
that is such a good point. And when you
Yeah.
mention, a botched murder leading to an investigation, leading to a declaration, that's exactly what happened in Watergate. There was a botched
Yes.
burglary, there was an
Yes.
investigation, and then there was resignation instead of a declaration, because ultimately Richard Nixon, for all his criminality, believed in the rule of law.
And he
That's what's
left.
missing now.
And
Donald
he
Trump
left. Yeah.
doesn't believe in the rule of law. And let's talk about his co-president. What's going on with Elon Musk, and how did he get into this, and what can we do about him with no, for example, no financial disclosures, obvious conflicts of interest? He's killing contracts, obviously none of the ones that are with him, and he makes billions of dollars from the federal government.
Yeah, he's actually, corruption is the frame for this part of things, for everything. But he's actually re-engineering government, rearranging government to get rid of any investigations against his
Yes. Yeah.
companies. And he sometimes, not only whole agencies, but within agencies, departments that had
Yes.
investigations against his products, like Neuralink.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
So he's it's a self-interested revamp of government, but
Yeah.
then he's also doing all this data capture, and I'm not a specialist in these things, so does he want a kind of generative AI? Is he going to sell it to the highest bidder? Because he's very close with both China and Russia, which are engaging in espionage and bad influence already. So it's very, very dangerous. And I'm not sure, because he doesn't have an official role, and yet he's meeting with state, heads of state
Yeah.
like Modi. It's hard to know, short of marshals coming and physically restraining him or something, which wouldn't happen.
It's
Um, it's hard to know. It's hard to. He can't be
yeah.
impeached. He can't be voted out. So this is something new. I want your audience to. This is something completely new.
Yeah.
It's a new kind of coup, um, and it's it's very hard to know what to do about it.
Yeah, I mean, his appearance at the cabinet meeting where he spoke more than
Hmm.
any cabinet member. When I said any other, he is not a cabinet member. He's not even, we don't know what he is, but he spoke and he was wearing a MAGA hat and a t-shirt. And it was and then in the Oval Office where he had his kid on his shoulders, and the kid that he put down and was like approaching the president. I mean, it was so horrifying to see that. It's it's something that I think, if I go back to Watergate, public pressure, public opinion mattered, and the
Hmm.
public was outraged and let the White House know. And that was part of, now, of course, back then facts mattered, and there was bipartisan acceptance of one set of facts. And once the Republicans saw what the facts were, they are the ones who demanded that he resign. It wasn't the Democrats, it was the Republicans
Yeah.
who were repulsed by him. So we're in a very different frame. And that's what scares me, is that we aren't going to get, impeachment is obvious for the things he's done now, for what he did and what he will do to NATO, to the UN, to our allies. Those are things that are impeachable acts. No one could deny that. But no one is going to vote for impeachment. And I shouldn't say no one. Every Democrat will, but no Republican will. Maybe Collins and Murkowski, but that's about it. And so I worry. And going back to the courts, he is saying, and J.D. Vance is saying, oh, we don't have to obey court orders. If
Hmm.
I'm saving the country, forget court orders. That seems to me a
Yeah.
dictator's way of approaching things, is I am the law. That's what he's
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, and that's classic dictator stuff. And the other thing they do is they amend the Constitution and they change the laws so that terrorism or torture become legal,
Yeah.
or them staying in office forever becomes legal because, like Putin did, he changed the Constitution so he can stay there till 2036. Um, so that's the way they approach it. But going back to our initial question, the reason that he can't be impeached by Republicans is that the initial question of, why is he in my book
Right.
as an authoritarian, is that in 2019, during that impeachment process, any Republican who voted to impeach had to get private security and wear body
Yeah.
armor because they thought they were going to die. And now this is much, much worse, this problem.
Yeah.
After January 6th was done, the way it unfolded in a way that left Republicans shocked, because no one was off limits to be targeted, even Mike Pence. And they learned that lesson. And so, and this is not, these things don't happen in democracies.
Yeah.
When you're afraid of getting killed by your own party and the own leader, or being harmed by some like paramilitary de facto person who's somehow acting for the leader, we're not in democracy anymore when that's going on.
Oh, so Ruth, you just mentioned something that makes me ask a follow-up question, which was the paramilitary. But here we also have the military being taken over. You have an unqualified Secretary Hegseth, who has now fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, an admiral, all of the TJACs, the chief judge advocate for every member of the service is gone. And let me add also the inspectors general, the Office of Special Counsel, all of these oversight agencies are being gutted, and they are being replaced with MAGA supporters who will allow anything to happen, who will approve anything. So now you have not just the Proud Boys, etc., the paramilitary groups who would, on a moment's notice, do whatever he wants, and they are armed. But you have the actual military, and there's no judge advocate general to say that's an illegal order. Do not follow it. That causes me even greater fear, because it seems to me that most dictators end up controlling the army, the army, the navy, the whatever services those countries have. Am I right to be worried about this? Is this a real thing, or am I overreacting?
No, you're not overreacting, because Trump has made it clear from the things he said to his former chief of staff, General Kelly.
Yeah.
He wanted his generals to be like he thought Hitler's generals were to him. He says he wants to use the military, if necessary, against, for domestic operations, against the enemies of the state. And
Wow.
the appointment of Hegseth, who's completely unqualified, but is a loyalist and will do
Yeah.
whatever he wants him to do. And really, it's very hard to find somebody so unqualified in so many ways to lead the biggest organization in the world, I
Wow.
believe. So there's all
Yeah.
of these different signs, and then the purge, of course, of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the head of the Navy. All of that
Yeah.
is out of the playbook.
Yeah.
And the goal is to politicize the military, so and give them a new role, whether that means acting in domestic operations or frankly doing things with autocrats like abroad. We don't know what the future holds with
Yeah.
that part of things. I
Yeah.
have to actually get off because 4 o'clock was my
Oh, okay.
um,
All right. Well, let me see if there's one last question. All right, maybe one last question. So, Ruth, looking back, you really correctly predicted everything that is happening right now. All of your commentary before the election warned us. Project 2025 warned us, but no one was listening. I was listening. I was warned, but the voters didn't. They voted for Donald Trump anyway. What can we do to make sure that they're getting the message and they're seeing the pain that he is causing?
I think in some ways it's more difficult because a lot of the large newspapers, think about what's happened to Washington Post under Jeff Bezos. They've become more cautious, and they perhaps are not the headlines. The reporters do their job, but the
Yes.
headlines and the executive editors are not giving us the headlines that are presenting with adequate gravity the stakes. So I think it's time for all of us to also, get busy and talk to people who we know who perhaps have not been living with facts. Perhaps they're kind of brainwashed by Fox, and it's time to kind of approach them again, because things will start to happen that will lead to buyer's remorse for those who
Yes.
voted for Trump. They didn't vote for Elon Musk to start savaging government. There's many, many things that will go on. And I think that we have opportunity to do this from below. Um, and and that's something that we might think doesn't matter, but if we all do it, it
Yeah.
can lead to some kind of civic re-education of people in to get them back to the truth.
I agree with you. It is up to us. It's up to all of us. And we're up to the task. We're going to do it. And it's starting to influence people because they're seeing their neighbors lose their jobs. That means
Yes,
that the restaurants that they would have eaten lunch at work are going to lose their business. It means that they can't afford groceries or the rent, and that will hurt the landlords and the grocery store owners. It's going to hurt everyone eventually, and you will know someone who has been hurt by this. And then, of course, the tariffs are going to raise prices. So eventually, people are going to go, I didn't mean to vote for that.
that's
And
right.
hopefully, people will rise up and protest and let their representatives know, contact your members, even if they're Democrats. Let them know you care and you want to
Mhm.
support them. Of course, if you have a representative who is is a Republican, they definitely need to hear from you and let them know that this is not what you voted for. Thank you, Ruth, so much. You have given great insight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jill.